Okay, welcome to video number 7, the Android development for Swinburne students. This video is a bit more difficult than the ones we've done before, or at least it seems that way. So I may be mucking around, editing things and debugging as you watch. I'm hoping that will be useful to you anyway if I need to do it. So just perhaps watch this video through once before copying exactly what I'm doing, because I may have to make changes. Just depends how good my guesses are. So this is basically saving our scores to a file and then loading our scores from a file. And we're just going to use a plain text file. So the only other change that I've made is I've moved reset scores button up here. Now obviously this is kind of the minimum. These videos are kind of the minimum we'd expect you to do. Or that we'd want you to do. Obviously play with this code a bit more, kind of like have more of a go experimenting and working with it. Anyway, what we're going to start off by doing is declaring a string which will be our file name. And this string will just contain the name of the file we wish to open. And we're only going to open it in a way that's accessible to this application, this Android application anyway. So the name doesn't matter too much. I'll just call mine scores file.text. And what we're going to do is just save some text on each line. Obviously you could go a bit more advanced and do something like create a delimited file. So create a file that had multiple values on each line, but there was some kind of delimiter like a semicolon or something like that. And you'd be able to then import and export directly to and from Excel. So say if you were to email that file, it would be useful somewhere else, or if you were to make it accessible to another application on your Android device. Anyway, we're going to create two different methods, basically one to load our scores file called load scores file, and this can be run basically when the application loads. Okay, so that's going to run when the application loads, and all we're going to do is change our class scoped variables. So we're just going to change these. If you were to do this in an external file, which would be a fairly normal way to do it, you'd actually return the contents of the file as an array or something like that. But we're just going to try and do it as easy as possible. So then the other one is save scores file, and they're our two methods. So save scores could be run every time the score changes. Load scores will only be run when our application loads. And what this will give us is persistent data. It means that the data will stay with us while we between multiple opening and closings of the application. So we just also will need a try and a catch block, because we're going to open a file. Basically, if you don't, you can throw the exception, which I think if you look at the brilliant work Arne's done, he just throws his exception, but we're just going to catch all exceptions, and so we're just using the generic exception object, and we'll just put in a to do here, handle exception, except we won't ever do it in this tutorial anyway. Okay, so we're just going to try and open the file. So we're going to try and load the file. And so the first thing that we need to do is create an input stream, which is, one word. Input stream is in is input stream equals open file input. So this is going to load our file in, and we'll give it our file name. Okay. So the next thing is we create a buffered reader, and this basically allows us to, instead of reading like a character at a time, it allows us to read basically a line at a time. So it equals new buffered reader, and it actually wants a input stream reader object, so as its constructor. So we'll give it an input stream reader, a new one, and that wants our input stream. So we give that our input stream. So we've passed our input stream, basically our file, to the reader, which reads kind of like a character at a time, and then we pass the character at a time reader, and this is layman's terms, you know, very basic, to our buffered reader, which reads a line at a time. So it kind of buffers up a whole line and then reads that out to us. So it's a useful way of reading input, not just from files, but also from you know, websites. Well, many types of input, so lines of text, whatever. Then we're just going to create our simple while loop to read the file. So this is very similar. We just need a string line equals. So this is just our what's going to be read in at each time. So we're basically saying while our line equals our buffered reader read line. So while it's getting something into it, basically, and this result is not equal to null. So this inside the brackets is evaluated first. So this bit's evaluated first, and line ends up equaling whatever was in our buffered reader read line. Now if the buffered reader read line can't get a line, it returns null. So we can say, well, you know, our line is not equal to null. Well, there's still content to read. Keep going through it. And then in here, we'll put in the code to read in our scores. And this is a little bit tricky. Normally what you do is you just read in, you know, you just add to a class-wide variable or a method-wide variable the line and just kind of build up or build an array or something like that. We actually know that we'll have wins, losses and draws on each line. So what we're going to do is create a little integer, and we're actually presupposing that there'll be at least 3 lines. So we'll do a integer count equals 0 and then a switch on that count, and case 1, so if our case 0, so if our switch equals 0, basically if count equals 0, then what we want to do is wins. So on line 0 will be our wins value, because integer dot pass int, and you can just use autocomplete there, and we're going to pass our line. Okay, then we break so it doesn't go through to the next one, and we'll just copy and paste, and we've got 3 of them. So we've basically got wins, losses, draws, and I'll leave you to add perhaps on the 3rd line or the 4th line save name or something like that. So you could easily do that. So this bit we keep because we're just passing the line that was most recently received, and if it's 0 or 1 or 2, so it will put the appropriate value in. But at the moment we aren't incrementing count yet, so we just need to do that at the bottom. So after it goes through, increment count, and our default action, we don't have one, so that by default if count doesn't equal 0, 1 or 2, it will just not run the switch, and we'll just any lines after the 3rd line, 1, 2, 3, will just come back. Well, we'll just do nothing. The loop will still run, but they'll just do nothing. Okay, so that reads in our file. That's our reading in file. Then the last thing we need to do is just make sure we close our input stream. So this basically just cleans up our resources and makes sure that we're not ending up building up a whole lot of, you know, kind of junk input streams around the place. Okay, so this is loading our scores file. So we want to do this on application load. So I'm just copying this function, and what I'm doing is going up here where we set wins, losses and draws to 0 in our onCreate, and instead loading our scores file. Okay, so now it will presuppose that it can load a scores file. Now if those values aren't set, so if it can't read the file or there's no data in the file, our wins, losses and scores won't be initialized. So I wrote that over the top of, but you actually might be better off putting it just underneath. And it looks a little redundant. You know, I've set them all to 0 and now I'm loading them, but it's just in case it doesn't find anything, so that it starts on the same platform. It starts with 0. Okay, then the next thing we can do is work on our save scores file. And so this is very similar. We use a try catch block again. You can catch the particular exception that will be thrown if you have an error. So you could catch, I think it's IO stream error, or it's file not found error, or something like that. You can put your mouse over open file input and see what types of throws file not found exception. So we could catch that in particular. We could in here make it a file not found exception. But I just am catching all I'm just catching all exceptions just because I'm lazy, and that way I don't have to write multiple catch blocks. Okay, so so here we've got our try and our catch. But why have I got an error here? Here we've got our try and I've got an extra one. Our try and catch blocks, and in our try we're going to put in our save scores to file code. So basically we do very similar to the read scores from file. Is we start with a file output stream, and file out fo, or file output stream I think is more common, fos, equals open file output, and it's our file name, and then you give it a context in which you wish to open the file. So we want to provide it with a private mode. So we're saying this file is only we're going to write to this file. We want to write over the top, but also it's only going to be available to this application. So context and then mode private. So there's different modes you can provide, and if you have a look at Arne's work, you'll see Arne's notes, topic 7. You'll see that he's listed the different contexts or the different modes you can provide to the file output, the open file output, and what they mean. And basically, you've got, you can make your file public, you can append to it, you can make it private, whatever you like. So this also allows us to create the file if it doesn't exist. So it will automatically create the file. So now we create a Bufferedreader, and this is very similar to the Bufferedreader in that it handles buffering of the files, and then it passes it to the output stream writer, which actually writes one character at a time, and that writes to our file output stream. So we pass through the appropriate did I spell it wrong? Oh, I've missed the new. I've got to create a new one. It's not a static object. So okay, so now we just use bufferedreader.write, lowercase write, and you write in here strings. So basically it accepts characters or strings. Okay, if you give it a integer or something like that, it just expects one character. So we want to give it a string, and the way we want to do that is we want to do string.value of, and then pass it, oh, I don't want all of these, and then pass it our wins. And so what this is kind of, if you've used the toString value on say an object where it returns just a string, string.value of allows us to use the string object to get the value of an integer object and convert it into a string. So this saves it properly in the file. Some languages do this for you automatically, like if you're using PHP, you wouldn't have to do this, and that has its own downfalls and benefits. Okay, so but this is how we get the value out of an integer. But it's also, you can also get it out of you can see there all the value ofs. We've got doubles, integers, floats, longs, objects, characters, booleans. So it gives us lots of options. Okay, we're just going to copy that line, and we'll end up with wins, losses, draws. And then we need to close our Bufferedreader, which also performs the job of writing to the file. So it's also, it actually is only buffered up to this point, and when we say close, it actually goes ahead and writes it. So sweet, we're able to save our scores to the file. So we really just want to do that when we refresh the screen. So what we can do is we'll go up to our refresh view, and we'll say after we set all these things, so after we set it to look like that, we'll also save our scores to a file so that they're available to us later. All right, hit run and we'll see how we go. Oh, I may have already done this actually, so mine might already have some scores in there. We actually have to set up this reset scores. So after we hit reset scores, it also saves scores to file. That's what I missed. So after we hit reset scores, we also then want to save those new 0 numbers to file so that they have some way of resetting them. At the moment, probably just have to increment, and my reset might not work. Yeah. So that's it does, yeah. Okay, so we're able to save data, and then when we leave the application and come back, and you can rerun it, it doesn't matter, it will access the same text file because it's got the same application ID. We're able to, we see that data is persistent. So that text file is accessible again and again and again, and we can constantly save and update it, which is pretty handy. Okay, thanks for watching video 7, and I'll see you in the next one.